Hello, my name is Aysam. I'm a second year PhD student at Centrale Nantes. I'm going to be presenting today for you my thesis subject, which is on hybrid electricity production. So in general, I'm going to give you insights on my doctoral research. I am basically I am contracted by Centrale Nantes. This PhD is in partnership with MAN Energy Solutions, which is a engine manufacturer. And you'll see as we go along what is the benefit of this industrial partnership and what I've been working on for the past year and for the next 2 years. So basically the topic is reduction of fuel consumption in isolated microgrids running on diesel power plants and renewable energy sources. So there's a lot of words in this phrase. I'm going to try to reduce it as much as possible, dissect it, starting with reduction of fuel consumption. So why do we need to reduce fuel consumption? First of all, we have the greenhouse gas emissions, which are impacting our climate. We have like a heavy critical climate change going on right now, as you may know. And so one factor that we can work on to reduce climate change or to control climate change is by reducing greenhouse emissions. The first byproduct of fuel combustion is CO2, which is the main gas in greenhouse emissions. So by reducing fuel consumption, it means we're reducing our emissions due to this energy. And so it would help our next generation in controlling the climate change. Second of all, we have to reduce the fuel consumption because of the fluctuating fuel prices. And as you can see in the graph right next to me, this is for 25 years time, the fuel price or the crude oil price in dollars per barrel. And you can see there's a huge fluctuations over these 25 years. So one main aspect that we have to do is reduce our dependency on this fuel, especially for small economies where they rely heavily on importing fuel, and any fluctuation may cause a big damage into the economy. So second of all, I'm going to pass to the second aspect of the topic, which is isolated microgrids. So what is a microgrid? A microgrid is basically a mini grid. So if we talk on a bigger scale, let's say that France is a grid by itself, electric grid by itself, where it generates electricity in different parts of France and it sends electricity to wherever it is needed. When we talk about microgrids, we're talking more of a scale of a village, let's say, and where the producer of this electricity is going to be at proximity to this village. So there's no transportation of electricity for high distances, for long distances. So what are the main components in a microgrid? So first of all, we're going to need the consumer, the person that is going to plug in his laptop and going to demand electricity in order to power his laptop. So we have our consumers. Second of all, we're going to need a source of energy to produce this energy. And mainly and traditionally we used to burn fuel in order to create electricity. So burning fuel, we're transforming chemical reaction into a mechanical power and then transforming this mechanical power into electrical power and thus being able to provide electricity to our consumer. Most traditionally, this is how we do it. We're considering diesel generators, which is one of the main sources of energy used in microgrids. Of course, there's other types, but my research is mainly focused on diesel generators. So secondly, as we said, we really need to reduce fuel consumption. And how can we do that? By increasing renewable energy in our microgrids. So one sort of renewable energy that we can add into our microgrids are solar panels. And solar panels work in a way that they capture the radiation of the sun to create electricity. So this is basically once you pay for this installation of these solar power plants, you're not going to pay for the electricity afterwards. But there is a basic problem in that. The basic problem is that we have to rely on the radiation of the sun in order to create electricity. If the sun isn't there, we're not going to create this electricity. So basically what we're saying, at night, this source of energy is not available. And during the day, if we are in a cloudy place where the cloud can block the radiation of the sun of hitting these solar panels, we're not going to be able to produce electricity that we were waiting for because of the sun. So one way to counteract this effect is by having the diesel generator inside the system. The diesel generator by itself is as a safety, let's say, is a precaution energy generator that for an instant, if we lose the power that is provided by the solar panels, we have the diesel engine that is capable to push more electricity into the grid and supply the demand. One other way that we can supply demand is by having utility scale batteries in our system. So utility scale batteries is where we store some of the energy that is created, let's say by solar panels or even by the diesel generated. So we store this energy for later use. And this is mainly used with renewable energy sources, where if we have at any instant we're producing more energy that we need at any instant, we can store this excess of energy in our utility scale batteries. Another aspect or another element that we have in microgrids is self-consumption, and we're seeing a high rise in these self-consumption elements. So a self-consumption is when you own a house and you want to put your own renewable energy sources in the house. So you produce your own electricity and you consume your own electricity. So you're reducing your reliance on the grid as a whole. And by doing so, you minimize what you're asking the grid or you're minimizing the demand on the grid itself. So you're relieving the grid. But the problem is that it's renewable energy and whatever the source is, but we're mainly focusing on solar panels here. So if you have solar panels installed in your house, and again, you may have the same problem if the cloud is passing overhead and blocking the sun radiation, then you're not gonna have this electricity. And then you're gonna rely again on the grid for it to give you the power that you need. And the grid must be ready at any instant to provide this power. Lastly, we have what we call the control room. So we have to control all these power sources. If we don't control them, then the system might go into critical points where we can damage the generators and we can damage the appliances in the consumer house. So the control room, what happens inside is that we control the frequency, we monitor the frequency, and frequency is a really good indicator of the health of the system. So right now, if I go and check at whatever plug in France, what is the frequency, it's gonna be 50 Hertz. If for any reason it is at 49 Hertz instead of 50 Hertz, it means that there is a sort of a problem on the grid, and that means that the controller inside the control room is going to know that there's a certain deficit between power demand and power consumed, and he's going to apply some changes in order to bring back this balance. Now I'm moving on to the diesel power plant. So I'm going to explain the main advantage, let's say, of the diesel power plant inside in our microgrid. So we have inertia. I'm going to explain what is inertia through the spinner. So as you can see, the spinner in the image is actually, once I give it energy, it's going to start rotating. And this energy is actually stored inside this rotating element. It won't stop unless there is a lot of friction on this element or any type of resistance. Otherwise, it will keep on going forever because it's stored the energy inside of it. And this means, and this is what's inertia basically, it's storing energy inside rotating elements. And conveniently in diesel engines, we do have rotating elements which can store this energy. So every diesel engine, let's say, has inertia inside of it, which can be quite crucial inside a grid where if power is needed or if we need more power at any instant, we have this stored energy inside the diesel engine by itself that we can put into the system, and this is almost instantaneous. So if I ask for more power right now, I'm gonna get more power exactly at the same moment because of inertia. And inertia, the thing is, it's not something durable. So it can give me power for, let's say, 5-6 seconds, the ultimate power that I need. But it's not sustainable. It can't, this form of energy will run out eventually. But this is only buying me time for the diesel engine to ramp up its power and produce by itself the energy that is needed. So what I'm saying here is that inertia opposes frequency variation, which increase the stability of my system. and meaning that if I have higher inertia, I will have higher stability and it will be extremely beneficial. Now, of course, there is advantages and disadvantages in diesel engines. First of all, one of the advantages is that it has a quick response for load variations. So if I demand power right now, it's going to give me this power. Of course, there's a certain ramp-up speed, but it is able to give me as fast as possible the power that I need. It ensures spinning reserve. And to explain spinning reserve, let's say we have a diesel engine that is operating at 50% of its maximal capacity. That means it still has 50% available to be injected in the system whenever we want it. Again, of course, there is a certain ramp-up speed. We can just ask it and it will deliver it as fast as possible. But we do have this spinning reserve, this 50% of its power output reserved for whenever we need it. And it increases grid stability. As I just talked about rotational inertia, this brings a lot of stability to the system. Disadvantages, first of all, we have high operational cost. As I said, there's the fuel prices that keep on fluctuating, and sometimes it's really high, sometimes it's really low, and this will impact the operational cost of the diesel generator. It is highly pollutant, again, producing a lot of CO2 and different types of pollutants that are really harmful to the environment. And this diesel engine requires a lot of frequent maintenance, which will add to the operational cost. Now, moving on to the renewable energy, I'm just gonna name a few of them, the most three important ones that are mostly used on the entire globe. So first of all, we have solar panels that run on the solar radiation, wind turbines which run on the speed of the wind in order to create electricity, and hydroelectricity, which basically runs on the flow of water to create electricity. So here I'm going to list the main problems in each one of them when adding them to a microgrid. What is the effect of adding these elements to the microgrid? So for solar panels, as you may know, solar panels are completely static. They don't have any mechanical parts in them. They're just no rotating elements, and thus they do not provide any inertia to the system. On the contrary, they actually take out some of the inertia, because if we increase the renewable energy or we increase the solar power output, that means we're going to have to decrease diesel engine output, and that means we're reducing the grid stability by reducing inertia. In terms of the wind turbines, well, basically there are rotating elements. It's based on a rotating element. But the problem is that the wind turbine is running at different speed or a different frequency from the grid. As you remember, in France, the grid frequency is at 50 hertz, while the wind turbine run at varying grid frequencies. That means we cannot supply this electricity directly from the wind turbine to the grid, because it will create a lot of disturbances because of this varying frequency. So what we have to do is we have to decouple the energy created from the grid. Usually it's decoupled through a converter, which I'm not going to go into, but it just means that the inertia is actually not being used in the grid because of this decoupling. In terms of hydroelectricity, well, actually it runs on turbines. So there is rotating element, there is inertia in these rotating elements. We can benefit from this inertia in our system to improve its stability. But the problem with hydroelectricity is that it does not provide any spinning reserve, or it does not provide primary spinning reserve. So primary spinning reserve is actually, as I explained it for the diesel engine, if I'm at 50% load, it means that I still have 50% load ready to be used with a certain ramp-up speed. The problem with hydroelectricity, if I demand more power of this plant, it's gonna take a lot of time in order to increase this power. So it's not effectively adding to the stability, because at an instant, if I demand power, I require it right now. It's not that I require it after 10 minutes. So you see from where we have like a difficulty in stability brought by the hydroelectricity. Moving on to advantages and disadvantages of grid following renewable energy sources. So first of all, will not run out. This source of energy will not run out. It's based on basically the sun, and if one day we wake up and there's no sun, I think we might have bigger problems than just renewable energy. The second of all, we have the environmental benefits. Of course, at the instant that we're creating this electricity, we're not producing any CO2 or little CO2. It depends on the renewable energy source. And this is highly beneficial in terms of the climate. And reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Now, I separate these two elements from each other because reducing reliance on fossil fuel, it also has an impact on the economy, so it has a financial aspect to it too. Disadvantages is that we have high upfront costs. We have geographical limitations. We can't just build hydroelectric power plants wherever we want. We have the geographic limitations of that. We can't just put solar panels wherever we want because we need sun in order to create this source of power. They do not provide spinning or primary spinning reserve, as I explained. They reduce grid stability, and they are intermittent, and this is basically, the intermittency is basically for the more dedicated for the solar panels and the wind turbines, where it really relies on the instant if we're producing power or not. So it relies on the solar radiation for solar panels and on the wind for wind turbines. Now, with all that said, I've explained in general what are the different aspects of my thesis of the subject. Now I can go into what are my objectives looking at this thesis, the subject. So first of all, we have to create some simulation tools, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. We have to optimize power management to be able to have the right power share between all the different sources of energy, and thus being able to produce electricity at a more stable, in a more stable way, and by reducing fuel consumption at the same time. And we have to adapt diesel engines operation to suit its function inside the microgrid, and thus being able to run it, for example, at lower operating points, and thus reducing its fuel consumption and giving the right amount of power. And to explain all of this, I'm going to go into a specific case study where you can follow a bit more with me what I've been talking about. So a specific case study is Tahiti, which is quite an isolated microgrid. There's no main grid connected to it. So just for example, France is connected to the continental European grid, which means at any instant it can buy or sell, let's say, electricity from the United Kingdom or from Italy. So it gives a certain reliability or a certain confidence in the system, because at any instant we can rely on our neighbors to produce electricity for us, or we can sell them our electricity. In the case of Tahiti, there's nothing connected to it. The energy is produced on the spot, on the island, and thus we have to transport this electricity to the island, and transporting fuel can be quite expensive. So this is a main problem in producing electricity in Tahiti, the high price of transportation of fuel. So at the moment, they are actually working really hard in renewable energy share in their system. At the moment, they are at 34%. 27% of this is coming from hydroelectricity. We have around 6 to 7% coming from solar panels, and what's left is coming from diesel power plants. So they have actually pledged to increase their renewable energy share from what it is right now at 34% up until 70% by the year 2030, which is quite a big goal to achieve. But my thesis is working on how to help this island in achieving this goal. So to explain a bit more, what are the challenges that they are facing at the moment in Tahiti? So they have their instantaneous renewable energy share that is reaching critical values on certain days. And as you can see here, during midday, let's say, we have high electricity produced by solar panels, which means that the renewable energy share is reaching up until 60 and 70% of the total power share, which can be quite crucial, because high renewable energy share does not provide any spinning reserve. It does not provide as much inertia as what we would have with diesel generators. So this creates a problem that we're reducing the grid stability while we're increasing the renewable energy share. What they are doing at the moment at Tahiti is that they are running more than what is needed in terms of diesel generator. So for example, instead of running one diesel generator at 80% of its complete capacity, they're running 3 diesel generators at, let's say, less than 50% their optimal capacity, which means that at this point the generator actually are producing a lot of fuel for its power output, and it's extremely inefficient. but it helps them having a high renewable energy share in their system. But this is the point where we can work on. We can work on the power management between the different renewable energy sources and the diesel generators in order to say at any instant, well, maybe at this point I could have run with only 2 engines and still be able to secure a certain threshold of stability in my system. So talking about the modelization or the modeling of I've been doing so far, we've created this dynamic model that is really a detailed model of the Tahitian power grid with a high level of detail, so including all the different types of generators. For example, the hydroelectricity, the diesel power plants, the distributed solar panels, PV, and the consumer, which can go up to 100 megawatt. So we've modeled this system, this microgrid, in a really highly detailed model. With this, we can monitor the grid's response to different incidents and scenarios. So for example, running on a normal day, we lose, for example, a high producing generator. Will the grid be able to handle this loss of power, or will it be difficult for it to handle this sort of power? So with this, we can analyze how or what type of changes we can put into the system in terms of hardware or in terms of power sharing, and in order to have higher stability in the grid while minimizing the fuel consumption. And this is basically the interface that is built in the model that we have created. So basically, if you remember the control room that I was talking about, it's something that looks like what is just above me. The controller has a lot of screens in front of him. He has a lot of control over his generating power sources, and he can manage all of this in terms of the grid's health by looking at the frequency of the system. So here what I'm showing you is that I have created this interface where I can check in real time the output of each generating units. I can check the health of the system by checking its frequency, its spinning reserve, and the share of renewable energy and diesel at any instant. And I can control the power of all different sources. Now obviously solar panel or solar power is not something that is quite controllable. Depends on the technology, but they're not quite controllable. But for us, we're trying to do simulations where we create different scenarios. So it's important for me to be able to go from, let's say, 12 megawatt of solar power generated to 2 or 10 megawatt or whatever change I want, just to see how the system will interact with this deviation. So one scenario that I'm gonna explain for you to understand how we can improve a system is that the scenario where we're running in a normal day, we have 50 megawatt of load. 72% of this load is coming from renewable energy share. What is left, 28%, is coming from diesel power plants. And at any instant of the day, we're gonna lose 10 megawatt of the solar power plant. Is the system gonna be able to handle this loss or not? So as you can see in the graph right above me, the green line indicates the solar power, solar energy. So at an instant time equal 10 seconds, we have a drop from 12 megawatt to 2 megawatt. So we can see how the system reacts to that. First of all, for the blue and the red, which is demonstrate the hydro and the diesel electricity, you can see at first the natural response of generators due to inertia. So as I explained, inertia is quick to inject power because of the stored energy inside these rotating elements. And we can see for the blue and the red line that there is an instantaneous power augmentation of power that is due to inertia, but this is not sustainable. After 2 or 3 seconds, this power is gonna go down again. And if the main producer of electricity, which is hydro turbine in the case of hydroelectricity, and the diesel generator in terms of the diesel power plant, if they do not provide this extra power, then the power is gonna go back to where it was before. And as we can see, for hydroelectricity, they do not provide primary reserve, as I said. So the power is gonna peak because of inertia, and then it's going to go down again to its value that it had before. For the diesel generator, it peaks, and then after sometimes the diesel generator is going to actually provide the power that is needed, and is gonna re-establish the equilibrium between demand and generation. Again, we can see also the frequency variation. The frequency is the really good indicator of the system health. So in Tahiti, the normal frequency is at 60 hertz. So if we go below 60 hertz, we know that there's a certain problem. At t equal 10 seconds, where we have the PV drop, we can see that the frequency is dropping from 60 hertz up until 58.5. And according to strict regulations put by the states or by the island itself, the frequency shouldn't go below 58%, or we might still start seeing some problems in the grid. So for this type of scenario, we actually went from 60 hertz to 58.5 hertz, which wasn't a big deal. The system, for this scenario, in this case, it means that the system was able to handle this sort of an incident, and but it doesn't mean that it can handle whatever incident we can throw at it. So this was a drop of 10 megawatt. Maybe if I put a drop of 15 megawatt, then I'll go below this 58 hertz threshold. And this is what we really want to study. Basically, I've given you up until this point the insight of my work up until this moment. So I've been working on this project since 1 year. I still have 2 years in my PhD, where I hopefully will be able to provide a strict power management tool where I can provide certain stability to the grid while reducing the fuel consumption as much as possible. If you're interested by this topic and you want to learn more about it, these are my coordinates. You can contact me at any time, and I will be happy to chat with you on the subject as a whole and on a PhD as a whole if you want to. So thank you for listening to me, and see you soon.